In the depths of ancient scrolls and prophecies, a timeless story unfolds, one that connects our present moment to a divine tapestry woven through millennia. Throughout history, humanity has faced moments that seem to herald the end of all things. Yet time and again, these very challenges have revealed themselves as gateways to extraordinary spiritual awakening. As we stand in 2025, witnessing headlines that echo with uncertainty, we're about to discover how our present circumstances are part of a greater design that has been unfolding since time immemorial. Consider the ancient prophets who spoke of times when the world would seem to teeter on the brink of chaos. Their words, carefully preserved through generations, describe seasons of unprecedented change that would shake the foundations of human society. Yet within these same prophecies lay hidden gems of hope, promises of revival, restoration, and renewal that would emerge from the very midst of tribulation. The pattern begins in the earliest pages of recorded history. When Noah faced a world descending into darkness, what appeared to be an ending became the dawn of a new beginning. The flood waters that seemed to spell doom actually carried the ark toward humanity's fresh start. This same pattern repeats throughout biblical history. Joseph's imprisonment led to Israel's salvation, the exile preceded restoration, and the crucifixion gave way to resurrection. Moving through time, we see this divine rhythm continuing to pulse through human history. The fall of Rome appeared catastrophic to those who lived through it, yet it opened the door for the spread of Christianity throughout Europe. The Black Death that devastated medieval society gave way to the Renaissance, a period of unprecedented spiritual and cultural awakening. Even the Industrial Revolution, which initially seemed to threaten traditional faith and values, ultimately led to some of the greatest religious revivals in history. Today's headlines mirror ancient prophecies in striking ways. Global tensions, technological revolutions, social upheaval, and environmental concerns all seem to align with prophetic writings. But here's where our story takes an unexpected turn. These parallels aren't pointing toward an ending, but rather toward another great awakening. Just as every previous crisis in human history has served as the catalyst for spiritual renewal, our present challenges are setting the stage for something remarkable. Consider how modern technology, despite its challenges, has made the gospel more accessible than ever before. Social media platforms that some feared would diminish faith have instead become powerful tools for spreading hope and truth to the furthest corners of the earth. The very innovations that seem to threaten traditional belief systems are now facilitating global prayer movements and unprecedented spiritual connections across continents. The prophetic scriptures speak of a time when knowledge would increase and people would run to and fro throughout the earth. While many have interpreted these signs ominously, we're witnessing how they're actually creating opportunities for spiritual awakening on a scale never before possible. Virtual prayer rooms connect believers across time zones, online communities foster spiritual growth in restricted nations, and digital platforms carry ancient truths to new generations in their own language and cultural context. As we examine current events through this lens of divine patterns, something remarkable becomes clear. The very circumstances that appear most challenging are precisely the conditions that have historically preceded spiritual breakthrough. Economic uncertainty? History shows it often drives people to seek eternal values. Social upheaval? It frequently creates openings for radical love and community to flourish. Environmental concerns? They're awakening humanity to our role as stewards of God's creation. The prophecies weren't just warnings, they were roadmaps. They weren't merely predicting trouble, but forecasting how God would work through challenging times to draw people back to himself. Every major prophetic passage in Scripture contains not just cautions about difficult times, but promises of God's faithfulness and ultimate victory. The book of Daniel didn't just predict kingdoms rising and falling, it revealed God's sovereign hand guiding history toward his purposes. The revelation to John isn't merely about tribulation, it's ultimately a book about triumph. Looking at our present moment through this prophetic lens reveals something extraordinary. We're not witnessing the unraveling of God's plan, but rather its meticulous unfolding. The very events that might appear as signs of decay are actually seeds of revival being planted. The shakings that seem to threaten stability are actually clearing the ground for new foundations of faith. Historical records show that times of greatest challenge have consistently preceded times of greatest spiritual advancement. The first century church flourished under persecution. The Protestant Reformation emerged from a time of deep religious corruption. The great missionary movements often arose during periods of social upheaval. Today's challenges aren't exceptions to this pattern, they're continuations of it. Modern testimonies are already beginning to emerge that confirm this ancient pattern. In regions where faith faces the greatest opposition, underground churches are growing exponentially. In societies where materialism reached its peak, young people are increasingly hungry for spiritual reality. In cultures where traditional religious expression has declined, authentic faith communities are flourishing in new and unexpected ways. The prophecies speak of a time when darkness would seem to cover the earth, but they don't stop there. They continue to describe how God's light would shine even more brightly in contrast. We're seeing this fulfilled as global prayer movements gain momentum, as reconciliation initiatives bridge ancient divides, and as new expressions of faith emerge that maintain biblical truth while engaging contemporary culture. Looking closer at current events, we can identify specific ways this pattern is manifesting. The rise of artificial intelligence, rather than diminishing faith, is prompting deeper questions about consciousness, meaning, and the human soul. Environmental challenges are awakening people to the biblical mandate of creation care. Social media's shortcomings are highlighting humanity's deep need for genuine community and authentic relationships. Each of these challenges carries within it the seeds of spiritual renewal. The same technology that seems to isolate people is being used to create new forms of meaningful connection. The questions raised by scientific advancement are leading people to explore spiritual dimensions of reality. The very forces that appear to threaten faith are actually setting the stage for its renewal. This isn't blind optimism, it's pattern recognition based on both biblical prophecy and historical precedent. Throughout scripture and history, we see God consistently working through circumstances that initially appear threatening to achieve purposes that are ultimately redemptive. The exile led to spiritual renewal. The persecution of the early church led to its expansion. The scientific revolution led to deeper understanding of God's creation. As we look ahead, we can anticipate that current global challenges will similarly serve as catalysts for spiritual awakening. The prophecy suggests that times of shaking would come, but they consistently point toward these shakings as preparation for revival, not harbingers of defeat. They speak of a time when the knowledge of God's glory would cover the earth as the waters cover the sea. This perspective transforms how we view current events. Headlines that might trigger anxiety become signals of anticipation. Challenges that might cause fear become occasions for faith. Changes that might seem threatening become opportunities for witnessing God's faithfulness in new ways. The prophetic patterns reveal that we're not approaching an ending, but rather a new beginning. Just as the darkest hour precedes the dawn, the current challenges are setting the stage for unprecedented spiritual awakening. This isn't just positive thinking, it's the consistent testimony of scripture and history, showing how God repeatedly brings revival out of challenge, renewal out of crisis, and spiritual awakening out of apparent darkness. As we conclude this journey through prophetic patterns, we're left with a compelling reality. God isn't just in control, He's actively working through current events to accomplish His purposes. The very circumstances that might appear as signs of decay are actually seeds of revival being planted. We're not watching a story of decline, but rather witnessing the early stages of another great spiritual awakening. This understanding doesn't dismiss the real challenges we face, but it places them in proper perspective. It reminds us that we're part of a larger story, one that has consistently shown how God uses times of challenge as catalysts for spiritual renewal. As we face the future, we can do so with confidence, knowing that the same God who has faithfully guided history continues to work through all circumstances to accomplish His ultimate purposes. The ancient prophecies and modern headlines aren't telling a story of defeat. They're revealing the early chapters of another great awakening. And as we align ourselves with this understanding, we become not just observers but participants in one of the most remarkable chapters of God's ongoing work in human history. The best pages of this story aren't in the past, they're still being written, and we're invited to play our part in their unfolding.